Now, Eastern Cape Premier Oscar Mabuyane is facing criticism for taking 34 days of leave, described as family responsibility, while the province continues to deal with the aftermath of devastating and deadly floods. The floods have left over 100 people dead, thousands others displaced, and a province in crisis as forecasts predict more inclement weather as winter bites. Now, Mabuyane's office announced that he'd be on leave from the 20th of June to the 23rd of July, with MEC Mlungisi Mvoko acting on his behalf. Mabuyane is reportedly taking the time off to care for his two sons as they attend winter initiation season. Is this time frame justified, considering the challenges that the province and its people currently face? We speak to Stellenbosch School of Public Leadership Professor Zwelinzima Ndevu now, who joins me. Good morning, Professor, and thank you so much for your time.
Hi, good morning, Ms. Chaba.
Good morning. Thank you so much for your time. Firstly, now, Eastern Cape Premier Oscar Mabuyane taking family responsibility leave while over 100 people have died in floods in his province. What is your immediate reaction to this decision?
Good morning, Ms. Chaba, and good morning to your listeners. I think at a face value, it is good for public representatives to also look after their families and take responsibilities of what happens to their families. The question should be, when there is a crisis of this nature, when over 100 people have lost their life, is it necessary or is it right for a public representative to take a prolonged leave of over a month? It would have been understandable if it's a weekend or two. But when you have a crisis, it is not a normal situation. Therefore, you want that particular person to be on the ground to ensure that thing happens as they should happen in addressing this crisis. So I think the challenge here is the prolonged leave that the Premier has taken when so many lives have been lost and there is still, the weather is still not good. It means that there might be other disasters recurring.
Now, Professor, the Premier says leadership begins at home, and he needed to support his sons during initiation. So, as someone who studies public leadership, how do you balance family responsibilities with public duty?
We must certainly applaud the Premier for taking that responsibility, for ensuring that he also looks after his family and support his children, because before he becomes a leader, he is the father to those boys, and that is applaudable. But I think once you take a leadership role, a public office, there is that balancing of responsibility. You are not only the father to the two kids, but you are also a leader to thousands and thousands of people from that Eastern Cape province. So you also have a responsibility for those people. And that balancing act would mean that while the Premier has this responsibility, you also have an added responsibility of the people of the province. And in governance, we would say that being a leader in a state of crisis or in a situation of an emergency, you need to be visible, you need to be seen to be leading by example, you need to be seen to be in the ground, calming the situation. And that's what we are missing with the Premier currently.
Now, the EFF is calling this blackmail, and they say that Mabuyane is using culture to avoid accountability. Do you think cultural practices are being weaponized here, or is this a legitimate family responsibility?
It would seem to me, I don't think this is the culture being weaponized, but it would seem to me that the Premier has been ill-advised. As I said, it is right for him to take some time off to look after this responsibility. But my question is whether does that responsibility needs the whole month or the whole 2 weeks, as we've seen. So I think he could have shortened that. He could have taken a few days or a week at most, and therefore go back to his business.
Some people are defending Mabuyane, saying he appointed an acting premier and government has many leaders. Is this a valid argument, or does the Premier have irreplaceable responsibilities during a crisis?
I think when he is not physically impaired, when the Premier could be able to execute his responsibility while balancing the family responsibility, symbolically, it is important for him to also be available and be seen to be sympathizing with those that have been affected by this tragedy, and not sympathizing with them only, but also helping in rebuilding their lives.
And are we being unfair to expect public officials to sacrifice family obligations?
Remember, public officials have voluntarily taken public office, and it comes with certain responsibilities. And it would not be unfair if we say, if you have set an oath of taking responsibility for public office, therefore you need to see that through. I think the balancing act, as I indicated, is very important in this instance.
And from a public leadership perspective, Professor, what message does this send to the families who lost loved ones in the floods? I mean, how might they interpret their premier being absent during their darkest hour?
I think for them, it might be that leadership does not care. It might be that the people that are in office do not care about what has happened to them. And this might just be a perception. It might not be something that is true, but that perception is important in politics and in public leadership for one to ensure that you are seen to be caring, and not only be caring by giving messages of support and all of that, by being on the ground and being with the people in their time of need. And this balancing act would have been important in this instance.
And looking at this from a governance perspective, Professor, should there be clearer policies about when senior public officials can take extended leave during emergencies?
I think we should, like emergency workers, we should have a policy that indicates, I think there is there, we don't need to have a new policy, but we should emphasize the importance of leadership being visible, being on the ground when issues of crisis are happening within their space of leadership. It is only when they are physically impaired, it is only when circumstances do not allow for them, or they're beyond their control for them to be able to be there, that they should not be there. But even those that are on leave are expected, when there is a crisis, to be recalled back to assist if there is a need. And therefore, I don't think we need a new policy, but it is need to ensure that people understand their duties and responsibility when they are in public office, which is a demand, by the way.
In your experience studying public leadership, Professor, have you seen similar cases where leaders had to choose between family and public duty during a crisis, or how did they handle it?
It is very rare where you see a situation unless that person would be required to be there, would be at the center of whatever is happening in the family. It is very rare. It is in very rare instances where you will see leaders taking prolonged leave. I can give a number of instances where people are bereaved. They would only take that weekend or a few days before that weekend, but they would not mourn for very long. They would be going back to their offices. So it shows the sense of agents, the understanding that agency they have in terms of leader in public office. So all over the world, that has been a norm, that people would not, even if they lose their spouses, they would be back in office after a few days or a few weeks at most.
And finally, Professor, what does this incident tell us about the challenges of public leadership in South Africa, where leaders must navigate between traditional responsibilities and modern governance demands?
I think the biggest issue here is accountability and taking responsibility. Leaders should take responsibility, should be seen to be with the people when they are needed the most. And that would show a caring government, would show caring leaders, would show leaders that put themselves in others' shoes, would show leaders that show empathy in others' situation. So while the Premier has done a right thing by appointing an acting Premier, but there's a symbolic, as an important leader within that particular province, and people that look up to him, it would have been good to also being seen to be there, even if it is not on a daily basis that he's there, but seen to be there. In fact, his homestead is not very far from Mthatha, for that matter.